In the next episode of SHRM Conversations from Chicago on the floor of the Expo Hall, we have Adam Posner. He's the host of a show called The Podcast, and he's also a recruiter based in NYC. We'll talk to him about his journey in recruiting, his podcast, and more. RegTech Media Travel is sponsored by our friends at Jobcase. Check them out at jobcase.com for your hourly and blue-collar and skilled worker needs. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to RegTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
All right, broadcasting live from the GP booth at SHRM24 in the Fishbowl, as they call it now, I guess. Today I've got Adam Posner, founder and managing director of NHP Talent Group, a boutique NYC-based staffing agency with expertise in marketing, media, and advertising. He's also host of the Podcast,
correct,
where he interviews top experts, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from the world of entrepreneurship, TA, and personal growth, and other world-class, amazing humans on their insights into their own career journeys. So, Adam, great to meet you, man.
Chris, thank you so much for having me on. I mean, I feel like I'm in a glass case of emotion. I feel like we have a captive room here, and we are the fish in the fishbowl. And thank you to GP for having us here, and thanks for having me on.
Definitely, man. Got a chance to meet you last night at the House of Blues there. Did you guys go out after that, or what'd you guys do?
We did. We went to go to another party, but the Uber delays caused us to get there late. So we got to the party when everything was over. And Chris, we were hangry. We were hungry. We needed to eat. And my dude Chad over there with the great people of Fountain, who brought me out to this event, had earmarked one of the best burger places in Chicago, and it did not disappoint. I'm still thinking about it. I may actually go back there today if my flight gets canceled.
Let's talk about recruiting and podcasting and all that stuff, but how'd you become a recruiter, first of all?
I think that there's very few natural-born recruiters that come out of school or whatever say, when I grow up, I want to be a recruiter. That's really not the way it works. People fall into this profession. They fall into it one way or another. And my story, make a long story long, born and raised New Yorker, spent the first 15 years of my career working in marketing, media, and advertising. I was an account guy, strategy guy. I worked at ad agencies. I worked at different brands like American Express, at SiriusXM. And about 9 years ago, I found myself working at VaynerMedia for the great Gary Vee, for anybody out there who's familiar with him, and pretty much a household name. And I ended up losing my job. I thought it was my forever job, Chris, and it wasn't. The grass was not greener on the other side, and that happens. Your expectations are one thing, but reality isn't. And it wasn't the right fit. It wasn't the right place. The company wasn't mature as far as an organizational standpoint. And I'll be honest with you.
Were you recruiting there?
No, I was a strategist. I was an account lead, and I got let go. And I was 35 at the time, and I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I knew I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing. And on my way out, Gary said to me, stop focusing on the things that you suck at and double down on your strengths. And while I'm there, on the day I was getting fired, in my kind of debriefing exit interview, we talked about my strengths, what I'm good at, what I'm not so good at. And I talked about, hey, I'm a good communicator. I actually do know this industry well. And he said, what else? Do you ever think about doing anything else? And I was like, you know what? My buddy does recruiting and finance. And before I could even finish my sentence, Gary goes, you would be a great recruiter. And I went off on my journey of first saying, wait a minute, I'm really going to change careers at 35. Like, I've been doing this for 15 years. Like, and I thought about the money. And I thought about, hey, we just moved to a house, expenses, kids, and all that kind of fun stuff. And I ate a big piece of humble pie, and I said, all right, I'm going to do this. And I didn't just jump into recruiting. I reached out to every recruiter I ever worked with before, some I didn't know, and I asked them for their time. Tell me about the industry. Tell them what I'm getting into. And I went through the process, and luckily for me, I got interviewed by a great agency called Onward Search. I didn't want to smile and dial, and I got taught by a great mentor the art and science of recruiting. And here we are 9 years later.
Remember your first hire?
I do remember my first hire, but it's actually my first hire was the first fire. This is a good one. Everyone knows in recruiting, especially agency recruiting, there's guarantee periods, right? It's a period, a kind of a probation period where candidate has to stay in, and if they get let go, the fee is returned or replacement. So 88 days into a 90-day guarantee, I get a call from the client. They say, listen, unfortunately, we're going to have to let call him John Doe, let him go. And I say, why? Is it his performance? They go, no, we suspect he's using drugs in the workplace. So what do you think my first question was?
Which drugs?
Exactly. We're in the ad industry. Like, everyone's smoking weed. It's a creative industry. Everyone's So they wouldn't tell me that. So I thought it was kind of like a BS excuse, right? But what I did learn is an early lesson the hard way, that these deals are not done until the guarantee period's over and the money clears and it's at the bank. And I'm glad I got that first lesson, right? I'm glad I got that first punch in the face early, because that set me up to manage expectations with the client, with the candidate, and myself moving forward for future deals.
Let's move on to the podcast for a second.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that?
5.5 years. I think we've recorded almost close to 400 episodes. We're getting to that 400 point. New episode every Friday. Haven't missed a week. Something that I really you know how it is with podcasting, man. You have milestones and goals and things. For me, that's the biggest one. It's not the number of downloads, because I think that's relative on your industry. And listen, we're not the Kelsey brothers. We're not the Kardashians, right? We're not, Barstool Sports. That's not our show. But for me, my metric is audience engagement. Yes, downloads to a certain point, but within my niche. But for me, it's consistency. The fact that I have not missed a new episode every Friday since November 19th, 2017 is it's kind of like my all right, good job, me. And that's only important to me.
How do you think podcasting has helped you become be a recruiter? In that aspect?
Well, I think that because we're recruiters, we're natural conversationalists. This is what we do all day long. And I think you take that. Any good recruiter, their number one characteristic is curiosity. And that applies to podcasting as well. I'm curious in what you're going to say next. I'm curious about learning your story. I'm curious about hearing your why and your mission. And my job as a recruiter and a podcast host is to pull that out and then frame it up to the right audience. Am I framing it up to the hiring manager? Or am I framing it up to my audience that's listening on a podcast?
So you recruit in media, advertising, marketing, and NYC. What's that like right now? How's the market there?
Well, it's been interesting. It's been a crazy couple of years. We saw early in the beginning of the pandemic, there's a lot of companies that had a huge influx of government funding, and they binge hired. That's what they did. It's great for their numbers. There's business coming in, and then the economy kind of recalibrated, right? Loans started to become due. Interest rates went up. All these economic conditions caused last in, first out, and a lot of people got let go. And the first people to let go in any organization during a downturn are recruiters. So if a company doesn't need internal recruiters, they don't need external recruiters. But there is a little bit of a silver lining there that happens on these cycles where companies let go of their internal recruiters and they're not ready to make a full-time hire, and that's where there's an opportunity for an external recruiter to come in on a contract basis. And that's where we're seeing a lot of these opportunities now, where it's a lower risk, it's a lower commitment, and they could bring in an external recruiter for a lower overhead.
You got any sourcing stories over the years? I mean, a couple of creative or favorite ways you found somebody and placed them.
Yeah, I mean, there's always kind of interesting ones there, and I think it comes down to sourcing and being creative with your sourcing. I love tapping into my network. It's so funny. My wife says all the time, she's like, I could tell you 4 things I need from the grocery store 2 minutes before you're going, and you won't remember any of them by the time you get to the grocery store. But in your crazy recruiter brain of yours, you can remember somebody that you met 6 years ago at a conference who said you should meet somebody, and then you go find that candidate one way or another. You figure out who that person was, and you're like a crazy investigator. So I think that's like a skill set that you have. But as far as stories, I think that it's kind of those boomerang moments where you spoke to a candidate 6 or 7 years ago, and somehow they come up in your memory. They come up on your LinkedIn, and you see them, and you think about them, like, I think Chris would be great for that job. And it's just because you made that relationship and that connection, and you remembered it, you have the ability to kind of go back. I mean, I met a candidate came up to me once at a Mets game, and he goes, "You remember you placed me?" I had a candidate. I remember my first thank you, like a written thank you letter for a candidate, and that kind of made me feel kind of like that was cool. She sent me a thank you card. That's why we do what we do in recruiting. Yes, there's money on the table to be made, but we wouldn't be in this business if we didn't care about people.
How about the most creative subject line you ever used to reach out to somebody?
That's a good
with that, do you put a strategy behind that stuff? Kind of,
I do
drill down in that kind of?
I don't do as much as I want to because I'm kind of the plumber with a broken toilet. I mean, I have a 15-year experience in marketing and media. I literally ran email marketing for SiriusXM. And I A/B test subject lines a bit, and I think you have to be careful to, depending on the role, depending on the title which you're going for. Sometimes I'll try a money motivator in there. Sometimes I'll try an opportunity motivator, and I always personalize. That's kind of it. But from a creative subject, my partner Kevin, who I work with a lot, he's kind of the king of the creative ones, so I pick up some fun things from him. I don't know him off the top of my head, but he's got some creative ones there that are, it's the hook. It's get your attention. Like, you just want to get their attention to open the email. Same thing with the interview process. The resume's job is to get you the interview. The email subject line's job is to get you to open the email, to click on the job description, to reach out to me. And once you start to think about that from a process standpoint and focus on the desired action of each step in the process, you will become a better recruiter. It's a good question.
Do you use any tools for sourcing beyond LinkedIn or the usuals, or any particular?
Yeah, I use So we'll talk about tools two different ways. CRM tool, I use a platform called Interseller. It's fantastic.
What is that? I've heard of it.
Yeah, Interseller is great. They're owned by Greenhouse. They got acquired by Greenhouse. They're our sponsor. They're our core sponsor. And I'm not just saying that because I used them first before they were a sponsor.
For the podcast?
For my recruiting practice. I use them for my recruiting practice, and they're an email scraping tool. They scrape the email from the LinkedIn, they pull it into a CRM, and then I have a multi-stage drip campaigns, which I use for the outreach. It's a fantastic tool. On the other side of the house, I use ChatGPT a lot in a few different ways. I've used this from a sourcing perspective where I take a client's job description and I use it to synthesize talking points when I'm talking to a candidate, and I'll also use it for Boolean searching.
Explain that more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a few prompts that I use that I've worked on and honed, and I keep them in a saved draft. Well, I'll take a job description that comes in, and generally speaking, the prompts are either from this job description, what are 10 questions I should ask a candidate on a screening call? I will also ask ChatGPT to take that job description and synthesize it down to a one-paragraph ad and use a certain tone of who I'm looking for, and I'll customize it a bit with different characteristics and tone and definitions within the ChatGPT prompt. There's a lot you could do. And I urge every recruiter out there to experiment because this tool is here. It's fantastic. And if you don't at least embrace it a little bit, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that next is AI and recruiting. I mean, do you worry about AI taking away recruiter jobs? What's your stance on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes down to using AI as a tool and not a crutch. And I think there's going to be a lot of functions that AI is certainly going to take over from our day-to-day job. So the trick is, either if you're working within an organization, how do you make yourself invaluable, where you are the one that's pushing AI forward to make your job faster, more efficient, and the processes that can be automated, so you have more time to focus on the human part, whether it be with the candidates, whether it be with the hiring managers. For example, there are some great video tools out there and audio recording tools where you're able to record a candidate screening call, isolate those key points, and either put it into text or clip it up, so that goes to the hiring manager, and now you're not playing the telephone game. Now you're hearing directly what Chris said to Adam on that call, and here's what my notes are on top of that. For example, Chris said this. This is spot on what we're looking for. He gave me a great example here, and here's why I think he'd be great for it. And then the hiring manager could listen to that clip directly.
Good stuff, Adam. Got any advice for somebody who wants to be a new recruiter?
Yeah, and I say don't. It's a rough industry, and I think there's two sides of it. One, embrace the tech, know how to use it. Understand that this is a roller coaster of an industry, and mind your mental health. This is one of the toughest positions because if you're an agency recruiter like I am, we are selling on all fronts. I'm selling the candidate, I'm selling the client, I'm selling the company. I'm selling all the time. And with sales comes rejections. And if you can't handle rejections, you're in the wrong industry.
Adam Posner, tell us where to go learn more, man.
Yes, you can check out the recruiting practice at NHP Talent Group, and you can also check out our Web3 practice, Probably Nothing Talent. I have a new job board up there on NHP Talent Group. Check it out. And the podcast at thepodcast.com.
There you go, folks.
That's how we do it.
Looking for your next HR technology role? Go to your browser, type in hrtechjob.com, and browse hundreds of jobs with the best HR technology vendors. HR tech professionals finally have a dedicated job marketplace to find work or be found. Sign up for job alerts or post a resume. Discover jobs with companies like Workday, Phenom, HiBob, Deal, and more. You'll even find HR tech roles with employers in case you want to work with managing HCM or HRIS platforms. HR Tech Job, the only job market for HR technology careers. Join us at hrtechjob.com.
Another episode of RecTech is in the books. Follow Chris on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit rectechmedia.com, where you can find the audio and links for this show on our blog. RecTech Media helps keep employers and recruiters up to date through our podcasts, webinars, and articles. So be sure to check out our other sites, recruiting headlines, and HR podcasters to stay on top of recruiting industry trends. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon on the next episode of RecTech, the Recruiting Technology Podcast.